Hello, and welcome to Entangled, the podcast where we explore the science of consciousness, the true nature of reality, and what it means to be a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm your host, Jordan Euclid, and today I'm joined by three friends and former guests for a special episode where we're talking about all things cephalopod. We started the conversation with some of our favorite fun facts about octopi and the similarities in intelligence between human and cephalopods, despite not having common ancestors. Next, we discussed whether octopi can dream, the decentralized structure of their brains, and the possibility that they're some form of extraterrestrial species. From there, we discuss octopi ability to change color, create texture, and shapeshift. We then talk about octopi's use of ink as a defense mechanism, the ability for dolphins to communicate telepathically, and the ability for humans to develop additional senses. We made sure to save some time for a discussion on bees, hippos, and whales as well. We end the discussion talking about octopus's fields of vision, other senses available to octopi, and the fun in experiencing the mysteries of the cosmos. Outros for this and all episodes are available at entangledpodcast.substack.com. Please enjoy. Today, I'm lucky to be joined by some of my favorite people in the world, all former Entangled interview guests. We've got Jeff King, Pete Karabas, and Lexi Thodos. How's everyone doing tonight?
Doing well, Jordan. Thanks for having us on the podcast.
Yeah, excited to dive into it. No pun intended.
Very excited to get into this, guys. An awesome topic. And yeah, man, thanks for having us, Jordan.
Awesome. Yeah, so the topic of tonight's discussion is the Cephalopod squad. You know, we've everyone on this call has come to recognize how crazy cool octopi and squid and cuttlefish are. And so we thought we needed to have a whole conversation to talk about them. So to kick things off, why don't we go around the horn and let me ask, what is one fact that you think is cool about octopi or other cephalopod? I don't know. And also, what would be your name if you were an octopus? Lexi, why don't we start with you?
All righty. Well, my name is Lexi Thodos. However, if I were an octopus, I would prefer the name Squish. I think out of everything that fascinates me about octopi and cephalopods, probably that they have really just decentralized brains. A majority of their neurons and their brain is located in their legs across pretty much a lower half of their body. So that's already pretty twisted from our typical view of how a thinking animal organism would work. But it just shows how dexterous and how much of a multi-dimensional creature they are.
Damn.
Yeah.
Jeff, how about you?
So I went back and forth on this, but Jordan, you and I had a podcast already, and we kind of touched on extraterrestrial life. And one of the cool facts, but I guess it's not necessarily a fact, it's more of a theory. But I love the fact that there's a theory that octopi or cephalopods came from space by being like ancient bacteria on a meteor. And we can get more into that later, but I think that's probably like something that I love to think about.
Yeah, that's wild. And what would your name be?
Oh shit! So I was thinking, like, if I was an octopus, I'd probably be thinking about like a cartoon octopus, and Brutus would probably be my name. You know me pretty well, Jordan. Just kind of like bumping around. I'd probably be one of the bigger ones.
That's awesome.
And that name kind of goes with. I hate that it's Ohio State's mascot, but we'll leave it at that. I think that's. I think that'd be good.
Cool. Well, I suppose I'll go next. You got Pete Karabas here. I guess if I was an octopus, I'm going to go with Ernie. I don't know why. I feel like Ernie's kind of a smart name of somebody that could be smart. I guess you have Bert and Ernie, and in that instance, Ernie's not too smart, but my octopus Ernie, I feel like could be smart. But in terms of, I'll tell you the one fact that really has just created my whole fascination with octopi and cephalopods, but mainly octopi is when I went down the rabbit hole, is building on Jeff's comment There's a lot of different types of species on Earth. You have some that are very intelligent, some that are not. And you have animals like dolphins, for example, dogs, for example, who, everyone knows very well. They're friendly creatures, they're intelligent animals, they're mammals, and all the above, and people look at them very fondly. They're almost like these happy animals people associate with very positively. Then on the other hand, right, you have octopi, which just exist in all different places in the ocean, right? But look absolutely nothing like us. They're not mammals. Not only that, they're not vertebrates. And, when you look all the way back in time from where they came from, they're older than dinosaurs. So to Jeff's point, one of these theories that octopi, came as some type of bacteria from maybe outer space, it certainly could make sense. And it's crazy to me to think, right, we look at a dog or a dolphin and you can trace the genetics back and see, where humans have common ancestors. Octopi are just about as close to a real life alien as you could ever get, because they're not even remotely close to us when you look back ancestrally speaking. But then on the same note, they exhibit a lot of these characteristics that humans do too. Like they're very curious, they're problem solvers, they're social, stuff like that. And then once you kind of absorb that fact, it's like, whoa, that's pretty intense. And then they just have this laundry list of all this other stuff that I'm sure we'll talk about. But I mean, from the camouflage to the intelligence to the venom, the way they make their homes, the fact that they don't have shells, that they're creative, that they have personalities. And it's like, you read a little bit about these animals and you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. And you keep reading and you're like, God, they feel like they're one of the most elite species on Earth, but they're at the bottom of the ocean.
And for me, one of the things that I love about cephalopods, is that cephalo means head and pod means foot. So it's literally head foot. It's like, that's how they look.
Yeah. Well, you think about some of those cuttlefish. I mean, they literally look like a little foot, with toes, and they got like two eyes popping out. So it's literally like a foot rolling around on a coral reef with two eyes on it. But once again, then it can just change colors and squirt ink and all the above. It's like, where did this thing come from?
Hey, guys, I just thought of something. Have you guys seen the movie The Arrival?
Yes.
Jessica Chastain?
No,
yes.
With Amy Adams.
Amy Adams. In that movie, it just dawned on me. I love that movie. That is definitely, I've seen it so many times. It's one of the most thought-provoking and one of the best movies out there. But it just dawned on me that their depiction of alien life form is essentially a mirror image or a variation on an octopus or a cephalopod. I'm pretty sure they're even called some like derivative of the word cephalopod in some way. I thought that was so cool, just realizing that. So maybe they are aliens. You never know.
That's a good point, because like one thing that I was thinking about earlier, just thinking about getting ready for this podcast, is the depiction of alien life, or like of mythical, crazy, powerful creatures. It's an octopus or a squid.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like War of the Worlds was the same way.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah.
A little scarier than a little cuttlefish, little foot running around a coral reef. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then I thought like big time about the Kraken. And that goes back like so long in history.
Is that like a Viking, Jeff?
Yeah.
It's
so
Greek.
And like our Greek mythology. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's so long to think about it, and it still comes up in movies today.
Well, and what's like one of the things I've been thinking about, just as you like re-examine all of history and a lot of Graham Hancock's ideas and stuff, like who's to say that these huge animals didn't actually exist? Like think about the animals that lived in North America before the end of the last ice age. Like we had huge like bear sloths and like just all kinds of ginormous mammals, so like maybe these krakens like were actually based on real animals.
Yeah. No, Jordan, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when you look at some of in any of these ancient studies, right, you like even take like magic mushrooms or psychedelics, for example, and you look at how the mushroom is depicted in different cultures over time, thousands and thousands of years ago, et cetera. And then to Jeff's point, you see this type octopus or cephalopod type figure show up, whether it's Greek mythology, whether it's modern Hollywood, whatever the case is. And it looks like a depiction of an extraterrestrial being. And then you bring it all back and say, okay, well, these things are amazingly sophisticated and we have no common ancestors. So yeah, one thing I just always think is evolution almost created intelligent beings, if we just want to call them that, 2 times over, like completely separately, almost from almost clean slates, right? 600 million years back, you can't find any common ancestors with humans. Dogs and dolphins are easy. You can see that very easily. But the idea that 600 million years ago, you had 2 totally different, however this started, right? Whether it's a molecule or a eukaryote or a prokaryote. And it's just went these created beings today that act very similarly and actually live similarly, but are not related at all, which is just crazy.
It's crazy. Well, and to me, that even calls into question the conception of like, what is evolution, in the sense of we have this view of evolution as almost like a evolution of ability to dominate in a way. But what if it's like more about just an evolution of consciousness, and that like a natural property of the universe is that life finds a way, to quote Jurassic Park?
Yeah. And honestly, Jordan, I feel like the quote unquote evolution that the scientific community is familiar with and stands to by the book since the beginning of time, that evolution, in my eyes, it really just takes into account the tangible evolution that we were able to observe and make sense of rationally as to, and what does an animal do, or what does any living creature or species have to do in order to survive? How do they adapt to threats, so on and so forth? But it doesn't take into account the things that we can't see straightforward. And I think there is so much that's happening in the metaphysical realm that extends beyond just human experience, and all life has this density to it, this magic to it, because at the end of the day, we cannot explain everything. And I think there are gaps here and there. And just because they're not really discussed by the scientific community as much because they don't have answers to it and they don't like being in that situation. But I definitely think that there's other forces at play, and, definitely like dolphins, cephalopods, even honeybees. You have all of these different animals out there and even plants that are just so intelligent. And it just draws into question, like what else is going on here?
You ever think maybe they're actually the most intelligent thing on Earth?
Yes, I think that all the time.
because they've realized that where their habitat is and how they can stay down below depths that we haven't even gone to, unless you're James Cameron and you get the opportunity to do that. Like, they've stayed away from all the shit that we're getting into.
Yeah, and they don't have ego, so they can use more of their energy towards figuring out and learning new things and being just way doper.
Well, Lexi, let me ask you about that, because maybe they do have egos, right? Maybe that is also a natural part of evolution.
That is a good point. I mean, I guess I don't know, but I would say that they definitely live most of their lives, I believe, in solitude. And I just think about myself, if that were the case, all that mental energy that I would be expending and the emotional energy, well, that might still be present. But, there's like so much in the day-to-day human life that sucks away at our spiritual presence, at our transcendent essence, our thumbprint in the fabric of the universe that's always going to be there. after we die, we're still in existence. And I think that, you know, you can call that the present moment, you know, awareness, but we get so easily swept off from that point, you know, just due to the day-to-day responsibilities and tasks and demands and pressures in our lives. And I think there is some beauty to the fact that when you're talking about an animal or a different form of life that doesn't have that whole wall of stimuli, it's something to think about. I don't know. I think about how, and this comes up a lot, and this actually kind of falls parallel to the fact that so many of octopi, so many of their really cool, almost magical abilities do lend to the fact that they had to develop these and evolve this way in order to maintain their existence, you know, like they don't have bones, they're invertebrates.
Yeah, it's so crazy.
And so they had to create all of these different types of mechanisms to sustain their existence of their species. And I think that in and of itself is just like a cool thing to consider. You know, it's like when you have to do something and all of your energy is poured into it, anything is really possible.
To not to get like into more movie talk, but I mean, we can. Going back to your point on Arrival, wasn't that the point of the aliens when they came back, was they were trying to explain to us how to not destroy ourselves?
Yes. And they said they communicated via that ink-like substance.
Yeah.
But they did. Yeah, Jeff, you're right. They were trying to tell us that, you know, we're here to warn you. And that's that falls in place with like so many of the, you know, extraterrestrial and alien contact we've had on Earth. It's basically the same message. So, you know, they're obviously on our team.
God, everyone's trying to warn us. I don't know why we just won't listen. We got aliens, we got flying saucers, we got things under the sea. It's just, I don't know. Once to Jeff's point, I feel maybe we're like number 10,000 on the food chain, and we're sitting around here thinking we're at the top. I mean, I don't see any octopi throwing nukes at each other, for example. But one thing too, Lexi, that you were saying, here's a crazy fact, and they're so far and away, when you talk about nervous systems, they're so far and away ahead of all other invertebrates that it's mind-boggling, right? You have a lot of different types of mammals that are, you know, intelligent, sophisticated, however you want to describe them. To give you this fact, so you have a mollusk, right, which is basically, you know, a cephalopod with a shell. The California sea slug is a simple one. It has like 18,000 neurons. So does a honeybee, etc. I'm sorry, a honeybee has 1 million. So sea slug, 18,000, honeybee, 1 million. And then you have an octopus, which is 500 million, right? And so when we think about like invertebrate and their nervous systems, and you think that the second place goes to the honeybee with 1 million neurons, and then first place is
that's crazy,
the octopus with 500 million.
Do you know what humans are?
Humans have 86 billion, so we just knock everyone out of the park. But nonetheless, I don't have this number in front of me, but the difference, even on a percentage basis, between the 86 billion that a human has and, you know, the next best mammal in terms of neurons, I guess, is not even close to that of place 1 and 2 on the invertebrate kingdom. So that's also peculiar about octopi, right? Or cephalopods. It's like how much more sophisticated their nervous systems are than any other species that's even remotely like them. Like they're far and away the king of their own domain.
Like it's almost like there's a gap in, or like a speeding up of evolution, which maybe leads credence to the idea of like it was actually, they came from some other planet, and that's why there's no like similar other ancestor.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot that points to that could be true, right? I mean, And then I was reading just earlier today, preparing a bit for this podcast too. And I was reading about, octopuses or octopi and cephalopod consciousness, coming back to your podcast here, Jordan. And one thing this guy had written, and he was some type of philosopher, like philosophers even have studied octopi. It's kind of a weird thing, right? But he's like, there's so much we don't know about consciousness that it's hard for us to sit here and say, we're smarter than octopi or we're nothing like them, right? Because we don't know what we might have that's similar with them. In other words, like if we saw an alien, for example, or if you go to the Arrival movie, for example, they're standing right by the aliens. You can tell both humans and the aliens are smart, but they're trying to figure out how to communicate, and it's kind of a barrier. And I think that, you can get that with octopi or cephalopods. And you see that, where you see that is, I'm sure you guys have seen My Octopus Teacher on Netflix.
Yeah.
That was another crazy doc where you see this octopus that literally befriends this guy over time, octopi can recognize human faces, right? That's crazy too. And so to recognize a human face, to know that person's not a threat. And so much more than that, they have their own personalities, right?
They can feel it.
Yeah, exactly. So exactly, Jeff. So when you think about consciousness and octopi and humans and all the stuff I just said, it's just raises a lot of interesting questions.
Here's the thing too, like when you think, how could we possibly, the giant squid was just discovered. I mean, the first image was in 2002 or 2004.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I think the first actual filming of it was early 2006 or something like that. So how could we possibly understand them enough to truly think if we are more we're more intelligent or not?
Well, I was reading about that, something similar too, Jeff, which is that they're just so difficult to study. Not only are, they're all different sizes, they're camouflaged, they sit at the bottom of the ocean, they're all different shapes and sizes. It's not like studying a golden retriever or any type of dog or even a dolphin or right at the surface. And we have lots in captivity. It's hard. It's been very hard, I think, for scientists and time consuming for scientists to actually study one of the most sophisticated sea creatures out there, which is really unlike anything, at least I can think of.
The one thing I was going to mention that honestly comes in ties with my fun fact at the beginning, but another fact that I love about octopi is the fact that we can't tell this for certain, speaking to what you're saying, Pete, but as far as from our observations, we can have enough evidence to believe that octopi have the capacity to dream. Because when octopi are sleeping, it's and there's a ton of research on this online, just of really just more observational, because again, it's not like we can take brain scans and really see what's going on. But when they are asleep, they will change colors, like they're as if they're alive. So as if they're mimicking a surrounding environment, but they're sleeping. So, that would draw you to believe that they have all of this potential. They have all these neurons across their whole body. They're these gigantic supercomputer minds, except their whole body is. And in their sleep, they are changing colors, and their changing of colors is just basically a pigment reaction that involves different tissues or muscles contracting and expanding. But the fact they do that when they're sleeping is insane to me. That means if that is true, that I don't want to say that 100% means they're dreaming, because I can't, but I would definitely put money on the fact that I would not put it past them. That is so, so cool to me. They're existing in a different dimension. I mean, that's what dreaming is. Your physical body is here, but your awareness, your consciousness is somewhere else. And the fact that that octopi, we
Do
have
dolphins dream?
I believe I don't know. Here, I'm gonna Google that right now. I'm like the guy in Joe Rogan's podcast that just like sits on the computer.
Jamie, Google that.
Yeah, Jamie. Yeah.
Jamie, look that up.
That guy's got a great search history.
Don't oh my god, I can't even imagine. I mean, think about it, like dogs dream. At least we think they do.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, my dogs like squeal in their dreams sometimes. It makes me sad.
I mean, who's to say that most animals don't dream? Like, it feels like these different states of consciousness, like sleep is obviously necessary for what I think like almost all animal species. And so like, it seems like it's very clearly physiologically like something that matters to living beings. And so who's to say that dreaming isn't also part of that? And, you know, maybe ants dream and we just don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Ants and their little tiny dreams. All
right, so
yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to clear the air. It is not clear whether dolphins undergo dream sleep. However, they sleep an average of 34% of the day, which is insane. Half their brain sleeps at a time, the other half is awake. It's crazy. Sorry, Pete, continue.
No, well, that seems about in line with humans. What, 34% of the day? So. Yeah, I mean, we sleep 8 hours or so it's not too far off. But yeah, you know, the other thing I just say, just, you know, steer us down another path here too, is just how smart octopi are and cephalopods are, their camouflage abilities, all this cool stuff you learn. You know, that's all one thing. And then I often joke that the more you read about them, it's like, what can't they do at one point? You know what I mean? And by that, it's like, physically, you know, they have their 3 hearts, they have their 1 central brain, and then they have a brain in each tentacle, I believe, or some variation of that, right? An octopus, at the end of the day, my conception is that it's like the whole thing's basically like a brain. You know, an octopus tentacle, and it grabs you. It tasting, smelling, feeling, it can sense gravity, and it's thinking, all with 1 arm. So, you know, when you hear about like the infamous octopus story where like an octopus gets, and then you cut its arm off and it regenerates, right? Or the arm like crawls away. I mean, it's actually just,
it's unbelievable.
I was laughing about it the other day. Like, if there were aliens on Earth, how are they not the top candidate? In like every single way possible. I mean, it's almost comical how crazy and magnificent they are. And to Jeff's point, it's like they're out of a book. They're out of like a fiction book. You know, they have venom, they have a beak. Some of them are poisonous, some of them aren't. And then they have the way their little cells work, they're called chromophores or something like that. Like when an octopus camouflages, and chameleons have the same ability and use the same like biology. But if you think about it like a balloon, like think about like a red water balloon. And I think if you had a bunch of microscopic water balloons of all different types of colors, and I'm doing probably a 70% job of explaining this, but all different types of colors, right? And so, you know, if you wanted to show more red on your skin, you know, your red little water balloon cell expands, so the surface area grows. So you see, you know, an octopus is like attached on a piece of coral, and it's not only are its cells expanding and contracting as they're sensing light and matching to a color behind them, but they're also doing that with texture too, right? So, you know, the sun comes in, they see how the sun's reflecting off something next to them, and their cells are adjusting for that, turning that color.
That's crazy.
And they have all these different pigments.
Pete, do you know, can they actually like change the consistency or texture of it, or can they only like make it look like that? You know what I mean?
My understanding is it's like a combination of both. So I know they can do, for example, an octopus can take, you know, you look at an octopus's arm, it's this squiggly looking limp thing, right? But they can make it look like a super sharp knife, like a samurai sword, for example, right? So they have this extreme muscular ability to change their shape. And so when you combine that extreme muscular ability, especially on a microscopic level, with this ability to change color, those two things combined, it's like when you look at an octopus and say, oh my God, how does half of its body look like a piece of coral and the other half of its body look like seaweed that's just blowing in the current or whatever? And once again, then you zoom back and say, okay, it's like this big brain and it's just absorbing this information and like making sense of it all like simultaneously.
Quicker than we can.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. It's nuts. Think about the video. Think about the ability that they have to change shape. Like a big 4-meter octopus or meter-long octopus even can look at a hole the size of a cue ball and get through it.
Oh yeah,
because it can change. Yeah. You know what I mean? Physically, it can change like that.
Yeah,
if that's not adapting if that's not adapting to survive the longest on a planet, like being able to do stuff like that and go camouflage and all that. Ultimately, every species' goal is to survive. If they haven't done it better than anything, what has? What, maybe a tardigrade, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly, Jeff. And the cephalopod basically said to the mollusk, well, I guess they were all mollusks one day, which is just a cephalopod with a shell. And then one day the cephalopod was just like, fuck it, I don't need the shell. And they just went on, and now they have these, they defended themselves in other ways. When you think about it, right, it's like, in some sense, would be the easiest thing to kill if you take away all of its crazy abilities like camouflage and ink and venom. But like, then the point I'm making is if you contrast that with a mollusk, which basically just says, you know what, I'm a clam, I'm just going to sit in a shell and reproduce however clams reproduce. And there's enough of us around here and we're covered in a hard shell and we have a soft body and, whatever. The octopus is just a snail, essentially, right? With no shell. It's just like the squishy, I guess, Lexi, your name's Squish, so it's probably a good name.
Squish. Well, yeah, and it was, they were just forced to adapt so rapidly. I mean, I don't know what the evolution, the part of time where they ditched the shell and I'm just thinking the second they ditch the shell, they have to pick up pace and figure it out fast, or else they're going to be wiped clean. You know what I mean? Off the face of the earth. Predators left and right are going to try to eat this squishy lump of meat floating around in the ocean. So
exactly. And Lexi, and then they're, think about this too. And then they're also, they taste good. I love eating octopus, although the more I read about them, I almost don't want to. But
it's like a love-hate relationship.
They are good.
Yeah, they're so tasty.
They're good. And you even see okay, you take it. Okay, I got rid of the shell. Right, I'm a mollusk now. I got rid of my shell. You'd think they operate kind of defensively, but then on the other hand, you hear about octopi that will jump out and they grab a bird right on the side of the seashore and bring it underwater and eat a bird. It's just, that's what I mean. It never ends with these things. They're just, they never cease to amaze. It's like they can kind of do everything and they don't even have a skeleton.
And the one thing that fascinates me about their defense mechanisms while we're still on the subject is that, everyone knows that they will ink their predators and they'll create this smoke shield with their ink. But what I found so fascinating is that they actually have the ability to, using their ink, create, I believe the word is like pseudomorph, which basically is they can create their exact shape. It's like a false body of them, but with their ink. And their ink has all of these properties that will not only irritate the eyes of a predator, but Pete and I were just watching this one, something on underwater, octopi were involved. And it was talking about how the this one eel is a huge threat to octopi in some region. Eels, their senses all kind of suck, except they have insanely good sense of smell. So they basically see with their nose. And obviously, I mean, this is an obviously statement for octopi because they're so insane. This would obviously be the case. Their ink contains these insane, I guess you'd call them like pheromones that will deliberately just completely throw eels off. And so you have this huge predator that just is one of the top predators for octopi. And they're able to create, aside from having the ink and being able to throw them off with that, they also can completely just target that specific predator and figure out a way to like amp up their defense mechanism. So their defense mechanisms aren't just, it's not like a zebra where they run really fast and they exist in large numbers. So that's really what they have going for them. You know what I mean? And they have stripes, so it's harder to see. Zebras are actually probably one of the coolest, but besides the point, octopi have such precise and well orchestrated forms of defense that it's almost like an enigma. It's crazy, honestly.
Way more ways of survival than humans.
Oh yeah, it exactly.
Like when you come down, when you come down to like just the actual being, the creature of it, technology out of it, they have way more ways to survive than humans do. And so think about their defense system of being able to survive and adapt in places where we can't find them. They've been, they've been able to understand to stay away from their biggest predator, which at the end of the day would be us.
Yeah, that's crazy. Which that makes me think of too, Jeff, is how much do they know about us? Like maybe they know a lot more than we think.
Yeah.
Right.
Jordan, that's like what I kind of was trying to touch on with the consciousness part of what this guy was writing about that I was reading earlier today, which is what if they are looking at us in certain ways and saying, these are pretty simple creatures, and they don't quite know how to communicate with us. You know what I mean? Similar.
They're very barbaric. They just kill us and eat us.
They're barbaric, whatever they think, who knows? Yeah, exactly. Similar, the good analogy, as long as we're using that, Arrival, we look at them, right, an alien or an octopus and say, oh, they're almost as smart of us, or they're really smart. We'll give them some credit. And the point is because we don't understand consciousness, even really a fraction of it, is what I'm coming to believe, is maybe they're way ahead of us in ways that we don't understand. Is what I'm trying to say.
Totally.
And you could argue that with other extraterrestrial beings. You could argue that with dolphins. You could argue that with a number of other examples. But yeah, that's what's remarkable to me is we always assume we're at the top of the food chain, and it's just not. I don't think it's the case.
Yeah.
Well, and Pete, with dolphins, we do have, I would say definitely more than octopi, we do have at least like a beginning of, we're starting to actually see that exchange of acknowledgement and awareness. Like there are so many encounters and phenomenon that people have described with dolphins, going into to protect them when they're in harm's way. One, someone's in the water and there's a shark coming, or if they're in harm's way, and dolphins have on record it's been recorded that dolphins have come in and helped people before.
Right.
And also there are people that claim that they have been able to telepathically communicate with dolphins. And there was this one video I was watching, there was this one like trainer, and she was saying how she would stand out of the water, and she's been working with these same dolphins. I believe it was like one or two that she was really close with. They were very familiar with each other. And she would stand outside the water along the edge, and in her mind, she would think, jump, but she wouldn't say it. She would just think, jump. And the dolphin would jump on command, and it would be, and then obviously that's a simplified version, but it would make it really complex. And the fact that is even possible is so insane. It is so wild. Cool. Yeah, it's so cool.
I think you could use a lot of these different types of, I'll just call them intelligent animal species, to try to help us understand consciousness. I think it all goes back to the same place. And Lexi, even that doc we were watching on Gaia the other day, where you have this blind guy who, you could find this guy on Google very easily. He has like an exceptional ability. He literally, this guy can use echolocation, like 100%. He can draw pictures of what's around him that has never been able to see since birth. He can draw accurate maps of what's around him. But he makes these clicks.
Wow.
He makes these clicks with his mouth, like kind of like a dolphin, honestly. So the reason I bring that up is human, right? This guy is blind. He's been forced to try to figure out other ways to navigate the world for whatever reasons. He, of all different blind people out there, has figured out how to do this very well. So what's to say that in other words, we're human and we're very underdeveloped in terms of echolocation abilities, right? So what if, an octopus or a dolphin looks at us, a dolphin could look at us, right, and say, these beings are almost as smart as us, for example. You kind of see what I'm saying? It's like, there's certain things they just do so much better, and it goes both ways. An octopus can learn and problem solve, and we're better at that. We think we are than they are, but what's really the measure, I guess, is the question.
Can they communicate with each other? Do we know?
I'm not sure.
I would assume some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they don't usually. What's the number, like, based on how many, when a female octopus will lay her eggs, there's like hundreds of thousands, and that number is typically dwindled down to like such a small, like a trivial amount. And they live pretty much, not always in solitude, but I don't know. I feel like
I think mostly they do.
I think they do.
I think so.
Well, I was watching this one documentary on, what's it called? That island it's like right north of Sicily in the Mediterranean. It has the volcano that's like constantly active. Anyways, there was deep sea divers and they went down there, and there's some reefs down there, and this volcano, it's an island. So it erupts, and then all of these piping hot giant boulders and lava and all of this material and matter is just rushing down into the water below, because again, it's literally just sitting, it's an island on the water. And right down there's a lot of like aquatic life, and there were divers, and they saw that there were 2 octopi that were living there, and they were studying them and observing them, and they observed that the octopi sensed when the volcano was about to erupt and would leave, probably like preceding the eruption by not like seconds before where they felt the rumbling noticeably, but like 10, 20 minutes before the divers even knew that there was a pending eruption. And they were like, this is insane. The fact that all the other fish, all the other life forms that are right down there. And the reason being is because these rocks will come plowing in there, and it will often kill a lot of the sea life down there. But the octopi, every time they would swim away like 20 minutes before. And I remember, on the documentary, they were saying like, they don't know how, but they think they're picking up on some form of electromagnetic frequency that permeates in some capacity that they can pick up on and immediately take action. So I feel like they had to have been able to communicate, you know what I mean? Be like, yo, I think this thing's about to erupt. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
To answer your question.
Yeah.
That's speculation.
So something else I was thinking about when Lexi was talking about how they have decentralized brains and nervous systems. And one of the metaphysical concepts I've found to be super interesting is the idea of non-locality of consciousness, and that consciousness as an entirety is non-localized. And even for humans who think that it's all in our brain and just our own brain, that it's not actually the case. And you see animals like octopi that support the idea that, if they can do it, then who's to say we're not capable of tapping into those capabilities as well?
For sure.
Yeah, and we're just not as advanced yet.
Yeah.
Which is the scary part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like what, the 500 million neurons versus the 86 billion, and whatever they say about how like we only use like 10% of the capacity of our brains. Like, what is it that we're not tapping into?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that this might be an extension of the conversation, but I also think that there's a difference between, the number and the scale of neurons. There's definitely correlation, but I don't know if that always directly implies causation in terms of more neurons, meaning that you're more woke, that you have this larger propensity towards being all knowing or being more conscious. I think that having more neurons obviously gives you a larger tool set to achieve that. But I don't know if that's always directly correlated. Like, totally. Pete, I know you brought up that thing about bees, and that's one of the craziest mysteries about bees, is that they really don't have that many neurons, but they have so much intelligence. And they actually bees happen to have, even though they don't have as many neurons, they have the most densely packed gray matter in their brains of any animal in the entire world. And so this is something that scientists are like, what? And bees also are extremely interconnected with electromagnetic and quantum realms. They have this insane vibrational coherence with the surrounding frequencies. They can sense when their storms are coming. They do this little dance with their bodies, and that dance alone will signify to the other bees. And this is all happening in the dark, beehive. It will sense to the other bees specifically. They'll do that usually to imply a location that they're referring to. If they went out and scoped out a new place, maybe to find more food or nutrients, or maybe a new place to create a new hive, they'll do this little dance, and that dance alone will specify the distance and the direction and basically all this other information around specifically a coordinate that could be up to like 8 miles away. With precision, just by doing this little vibrational dance, it will signal that to the rest of its bees.
So that would be like honey crazy. This way or something. I mean, pollen this way.
What do you mean?
Is is that the kind of thing they would be signaling to one another?
Yeah, I mean, they'll signal. So like they'll go out into the world and say they find, a really dense field of wildflowers. Mm-hmm. One of them does. And they're like, wow, this is insane. I got to go tell all the homies. So they'll go back to the beehive and they'll go and they communicate with vibration. Mm. And so that's why you see, when you open up a beehive, if you look in it, you have all these hexagons, and it's so cool because they're so precise, and there isn't like one organizational task maker that's directing, okay, this needs to be like, they all just inherently and instinctually create perfectly. Exactly. They know how to create these perfect structures. And I was actually reading something about a hexagon is similar to like, if you were to collapse like the fourth dimension or if you were to draw a box on a piece of paper, that's collapsing the third dimension into the second dimension, right? So if you go outwards in dimensions, there's some relationship between the hexagon shape and like a sixth dimensional existence of some form. I don't know. I feel like I'm not going to continue on that path, but definitely.
No, I know. I get what you're saying.
I want to learn more about it.
It makes sense.
Think about that. Like when Lexi brought up like dimensions and everything. So think about that. Like an octopus or a lot of these creatures, like going back to the bee, just woke up and they get together and they know how to build that. Mm-hmm. I, as a human, can't just wake up and build a house. I have to learn from something else to do it. Or like an octopus just all of a sudden realized by itself. We don't see it get taught how to go camouflage.
Yeah, that's another thing with octopi is that they're one of the few animals that have to learn, like their brains or their, intelligence is probably so sharp because it literally has to learn it all from scratch from the beginning. Like it doesn't have a mother to teach, the young, okay, this is how you hunt, this is how you do this is how you do that, like a lion would. But that's, so think about like crazy.
Maybe it's getting something from something that we don't understand because our consciousness and our ability to perceive dimensions and stuff isn't there yet.
Yeah,
because we need help in the physical, but they go elsewhere and get that information in a different way than we do.
Yeah, and also think about maybe their eyes are just, what if like they have different visible light spectrums that they can see, and they can see gamma rays or infrared rays or something. And they can see things that are there that we think aren't there because we can't see them.
For sure, Jordan. They can see without their eyes, basically. I mean, how do you think they camouflage every single inch of their being? They don't use their eyes to look around in every crevice that that surrounds them to determine, okay, this like needs to turn orange, an orangey hue. Like they have these receptors throughout their body. Whether it comes down to some like biochemical reaction, which it does, but it's like there's definitely this other element of this like being receptive to this other like stream of energy and this energetic reaction that allows them to operate like that.
Yep. So I want to go back to the idea that Jeff was talking about early on, and where that octopi could have been from like an asteroid or something. And then I've heard another theory kind of along those lines, but even crazier, called like directed panspermia, which is this idea that DNA is so complicated and it's almost like a computer code that it looks to have been created by some other intelligent civilization, or like that's just a possibility that it was like. So anyway, what I'm getting at with that is like, is it possible that DNA is all related amongst all the different species on Earth, and maybe it's just kind of like whichever one can survive to evolve throughout all the crazy things that happen on Earth will end up being the one that runs the Earth, right? Like maybe it could have been the dinosaurs back in the day if they hadn't gotten wiped out. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In other words, there's several different types of DNA almost at the start, if you will. And then they're almost each like a dice roll, I guess I'd say. And then certain things happen on Earth or other planets, certain changes in climate, whatever the case is, certain environments. And obviously, some DNA changes to be superior and continues to do that and evolves, et cetera. I think I get what you're saying, Jordan, but that would make sense to me.
Yeah, I learned that hippos actually descended from whales. That's unrelated in any way.
That's crazy.
That's their closest relative ancestor. Isn't that insane? That's why they have like 2-inch thick flubber
that is
surrounding
insane.
them. Yeah.
Where do hippos live?
Africa. Hippos, there's like the river streams in Africa that they actually just chill in the river for protection for the most part, because they usually at night they'll go on land and they'll eat all their food, and then they go back to the river for protection, mainly because of like a pack of lions is really probably their biggest threat. A single lion probably couldn't kill a hippo. Hippos are actually one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. So
what's the stat? They kill more humans than like anything.
Yeah. Well, actually, you're right. There's some statistic that, because so they can like run really fast. They are insanely, hippos, like their legs they can go underwater for up to like 5 minutes, 5-6 minutes. But since they are holding their breath and they have all this oxygen filling the sacs of their lungs that makes them buoyant. So to counteract the buoyancy, hippos' legs are like 100% solid bone. Like they're just these heavy, dense bones that are like short and that just basically anchor them to the bottom of the riverbed. And so that's why when you see hippos, you'll occasionally see them like pop their eyes up and then they'll just go right back down. But yeah, I mean, like they're mammals. They still need to breathe, but they've adapted in crazy ways themselves.
This might be a really stupid question, but are whales mammals?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, like sharks
Whales,
are not.
How is that defined, mammal?
Warm-blooded animal?
It gives birth. Yeah, warm-blooded, and like it doesn't like lay eggs.
Like eggs.
It has like a traditional like vaginal birth.
Mammals are a group of vertebrates constituting the class Mammalia, characterized by the presence of mammary glands, which in females produce milk, feeding their young, et cetera, often have fur or hair. So even like some of these big sea mammals even have some little hairs and stuff, but it's not just that, it's other things. But they're vertebrates. And even just to go back to octopi and cephalopods, that's the crazy thing too. I can never get out of my head is most of the real intelligent, sophisticated animals we know are vertebrates. And then you have
that's a good point.
invertebrates, which, are all different. There's all different types, but generally speaking, they're not as close as intelligent and sophisticated as mammals that we're familiar with, right? So, I mean, they have no skeleton, right? I mean, they have no backbone. An octopus, all they have is, I believe, some little bone in their head that like protects some essential organ, something like that.
What's crazy to me too is that all their organs can change shape too, right? Like what?
Yeah.
They're literally shapeshifters. It's insane to watch.
Yeah, right.
And they use that to solve problems.
Right. I mean, you have some of these octopi or cephalopods that, they actually just on second thought decided they wanted a shell, right? And so they grab something, and it could be a piece of sea garbage, it could be a dead clamshell, whatever, and they'll walk around with it on their back. And going back to like how their trademark of the octopus is just their insane ability to learn and solve problems. They're plopped on Earth. They don't have any guidance whatsoever, right? Nothing's teaching them. And they just start figuring out how to survive. And then what that results in is you have you have a lot of different types of octopi and cephalopods. And, they've learned to live in the world in even similar environments in different ways, right? One wants to carry a shell on its back for protection. One uses camouflage more. One squirts ink way more frequently than another one, for example. Like they're all very different. It's crazy. Like you can even look at so many different animals, right? And even the dolphin, and I'm not sure I'm right about this, but they all seem to act pretty similar. And yes, they probably have some personalities and stuff. But even dogs, right? They all kind of act pretty similar. Octopi by themselves are so different individually. That's why people often say too, they each have their own personalities.
I think it's because they have their own individual experiences that are like totally unique to any other living octopus, because they have to do it all on their own. They have no one else to teach them. So the way that they learn and adapt to their surroundings and their environment and their threats and their rewards, it's all, they have these just adaptive dynamic cells that really that sit at the core of manifestation. Truly, they just they become what they need to be.
So that would be really interesting to be able to study if you could take like the same species of octopi and study the differences of their each individual like adaptations to survive they have. Because like what if one of them doesn't squirt ink like the other one does, or doesn't quite get more camouflage like the other one does.
Yeah, and Jeff, to your point, some of the studies that scientists have done, that's one of the remarkable findings, is that you can put different octopi in similar or the same experiments, and they solve them differently, which is kind of crazy to think about. It's not like they all do the same thing. Or you always hear, you'll have octopi in captivity, and one of them will escape its tank in the same fashion over and over and over, and others will do it their own way. So there's another interesting thing I read, and I think I'm getting this right, where they do something like they're trying to test the octopus brain, right? And so, they have 9 brains or whatever that means. To me, it's all one big brain, but they take like one tentacle and they put it like out of the water, and the octopi has to use that tentacle plus using its eyes to like unlock some hinge, and then it can get out. And so like it can figure out complex stuff like that, where it's losing a lot of its ability in its arm, or one of its brains, if you want to think about it that way, when it's out of the water. And then it makes up for it by using its eye and the other parts of its brain to solve a problem, which is bizarre.
What do they eat?
A bunch of different stuff.
Tons of stuff.
Crabs.
Different fish.
Those little spiky, what are those called? Sea urchins.
Yeah.
Right?
Urchins. Yeah, they do.
Do they open them up, or do they eat them with this?
Jordan.
They do?
They do, but before they open them up, they figure out, wait a minute, I have a lot better chance of getting into this thing if I learn how to flip it on its back and then separate it at this joint or whatever, this part of its body. And so that's another thing, right? Like similar to humans, they have this wide spectrum of a diet, right? They eat different things. They figure out what's available, and they figure out how to eat it, get past its defenses in many cases in the animal kingdom. So it's like, yeah, what do they eat? They eat. It's not like they're a whale, or a dolphin where they're kind of all eating the same thing. I believe they all just eat whatever's out there. It's kind of like humans.
And that would make sense if they're just really intelligent and have evolved to adapt, that they would have a wider palate.
Yeah. Right. Like I think the idea is like you could plop one down in, a number of different ecosystems, and they would figure out what to eat, how to eat it, and how to survive subsequently.
Yeah. How long can they even survive outside of water?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure.
But I mean, that is so fucking crazy too. These guys just get out of the ocean. Like what?
Jordan, and even like, I don't know how right I am about this either, but even I suppose one question is, right, like you hear the infamous tale of the octopi escaping the tank in the laboratory, like a Finding Nemo situation. And even for an octopi to be able to like take some type of calculated risk, knowing, like for example, a fish is never going to jump out of a tank and think, all right, I'm going to flap my way across the floor and then try to find my way back into the ocean, right? Mm-hmm. It's just going to swim in circles.
Also think about it like that story. Also to have like the ability to think, I have to wait until my human keeper leaves the room.
Exactly, Jeff. That's the crazy stuff, that type of stuff. I got to wait until dark. Once the lights go off, I can start messing around like some type of Houdini.
Like Toy Story.
Yeah.
Have you seen that meme where there's the octopus that sometimes looks pissed off and that it punches fish? Oh, we shared it in the Octo Nation group.
Yeah.
Yeah, they always look so pissed off with their little squinty eyes.
And sometimes they'll just punch fish.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
I don't like the way that fish is swimming at me. I'm just gonna sock him right in the gut.
Well, and they have like what like 180 degree vision, or no more than that. They have like 360.
No,
they can.
Oh yeah,
see
their
everything.
eyes move in a circle.
But it's interesting. Most of them are colorblind.
Well,
really?
they're colorblind. But one of my favorite octopi fun facts is they don't have a blind spot, is what they say. So the way their eyes are positioned on their head, right, is such that it's 360 degrees around them they can see. And their eyes are actually very similar to human eyes, as opposed to something like a dolphin, right? That's essentially blind. Like octopi, once again, we're not related, 600 million years, no ancestors in common, and we develop a similar eye, right? It's like, that's bizarre.
Mm.
So think about it too. If they're like, most of them are some type of colorblind, but then they can also change their own body's colors and know which colors they're changing to.
Yeah.
Holy shit, I never even thought about that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like that's just because we see through the perspective, no pun intended, but we experience life through the perspective of seeing with our eyes to represent reality, the world around us. But octopi clearly defy the notion of that being the only case, because they don't need their eyes or only their eyes to be able to, and same with any other animal. You can use anything, sound, you can use obviously texture, different vibrations. I think that it's insane. Yeah. Like octopi obviously have eyes, but going back to what we were saying, how they can see light without using their eyes, and whether that's via touch, I don't know too far down that, but I do know that they have like a heightened sensory perceptive like ability, which is insane.
Yeah. And what about, Lexi, I think we've even talked about the idea that there's other senses that like they used to know how to access in ancient Egypt. And like, what if there are other senses besides the 5 that we think about that we just haven't even thought to, like, that we just don't even understand what that experience feels like, but that other animals have that, right? Like echolocation, I think, is a good example.
Echolocation,
yeah, sure.
Jordan, in that Gaia doc about the blind guy who learns how to use it very effectively from an early age, that's exactly what he calls it. What he says is that we have more than 6 senses. We just aren't familiar with them. Mm. That's what he says.
Well, and Pete, when you brought that up at first, when I was talking and then I went on a tangent, that is what I was trying to say. And the reason being is that it's the concept, and this really just resonates for me, just this concept. And it's the concept that when we are like mechanisms, nothing about us is fixed. We are constantly evolving and adapting, whether spiritually, physically, emotionally. And when we are put into an environment, for instance, like this man who was blind, he couldn't see. So he's all of a sudden, we see from the outer world as view that as a deficit, right? You cannot see. So now you have one lesser tool in your toolbox. But the potential and the complexity of life is so cool to me. And this is kind of like the whole thesis of what I'm saying. And it's that when I don't want to say brain, but when our energy source, let's say our life force, whatever you want to call it, but when it's constrained in one capacity, that energy, it can't be created or destroyed. It just changes form. And this concept can be applied towards, everything in life. But for instance, in the case of someone who's blind, now, yeah, you just took away one sense of theirs, but now they have all of their other senses are just so much more profoundly heightened that they're starting to, triangulate and crossbreed these senses into these new senses. And now they're able to become so much more intimately entangled with their surroundings in ways that are so much further beyond what we are experiencing as someone who can see and who has all of these, the typical, 5 senses. But the Egyptians are claimed to have been able to access all 360, I believe, of total senses. And this can explain a lot of these ancient structures that we don't really know why or, how, or why they were built. And a lot of people say, oh, well, they were built for the royal that have passed. And this is this is where they rest. And but there's so much evidence that suggests that so many of these structures were built as all these different devices, like for instance, like a sonar device, God, that's not the right word, but where they have created these chambers. And this is present in a lot of ancient structures that are built around the world, in the Mayan ruins, there's, in Southern Europe, and where there's evidence that the structures are built in a way that can amplify sound waves. And I was just watching this one documentary and it was talking about, I can't remember where it was, but it basically was created where it's like this underground dome, and they measured the dimensions, and naturally all these ancient structures are perfectly built with perfect dimensions and everything. It's mind blowing, but you see, and this is super consistent, that there's a pattern of them using these as tools to achieve these means that are just beyond the senses that we have right now. There's even beliefs that how they built the pyramids and these giant structures wasn't through all these guys holding, ropes and trying to lug these stones, but rather using sound and being able to using some sense of a sonic projection and have the sound basically move stuff. And there's other ruins where they use sound to connect with the dead and to create this meditative state that they have researched and compared that's the same as when someone's in deep meditation, or, the brainwaves of a child. That's the same state that when they did these tests in these ruins and it generated this sound that basically puts you in an alpha brainwave state, which it allowed, they did ceremonies where people could connect with the dead. I mean, we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg here. And it's insane just to think about. This kind of goes back, just full circling myself here, just goes back to the fact that in this day and age, we have new demands, new responsibilities, new ways, new competition, new ways that we need to focus on to survive. But, what we gave up for that is, we're diluting the energy potential that we have to really tune into some of these fields that exist that humans were really able to tap into and work really conducively with back then. It's they didn't have the distractions of checking your email or, Russia's bombing Ukraine or this, that, and the other. It's they were whatever was right in front of them, and they just really connected with the here and now. And it really just shows the potential of what that allowed them to do.
Being able to focus on what really matters to survive.
Exactly. And today we call it meditation.
Not just survive, Jeff, but to thrive, right?
Thrive.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think the other thing, and that was really well said, Lexi, and I think the other thing about those other capabilities is if you're in a civilization, the importance of culture is so important for all this story too, because if you're in a civilization where everyone accepts that you have other access to senses, then you're in your default mode of consciousness or whatever you want to call it, then it becomes much more easy to believe that you too can tap into that potentiality. And I think that's why in our modern culture, when we just so many people are so locked into the views of mainstream conventional science that they don't believe in that, some of these other energies and capabilities that these ancient civilizations were able to tap into are even possible. But then you look at like other civilizations like the Vedic culture in India and these ideas of like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, where like whole civilizations like thought that you had that, like knew that you could do things like levitate, but when you're not living in a society that believes in that, it becomes much harder to believe in it yourself.
For sure. And I mean, I'll just say that they were doing stuff that they didn't need science to tell them that what was happening right in front of their eyes was working or was the reality. You know, it's like the modern science that our society adheres to today was created and established in so much time after so much of these ancient civilizations and the ancient intelligence that we're talking of. You know, it's like all of this stuff with modern science that we've established, it's like that came into play thousands and thousands of years later. So that was something that we made up as just a framework for us to start deeming what is and what isn't. But like, who's to say that we're the ones that are allowed to deem what is and isn't? You know, it's like, that seems kind of skewed or biased. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's a whole other conversation, but it's, yeah, for sure. It's like they had just this open mind and they were like really just energetically receptive to one another. And, you know, humans were, you know, all about community. The sum was greater than the parts. It's so cool. There's so many gaps, but that's what makes it so mystical and so just awesome.
And you talked about like sound technologies and harmonics that the ancient Egyptians had. And then, you know, not even just that, you think about other technologies that maybe these ancient folks had. Like I've heard ideas that some of these ancient monuments are aligned with eclipses because there's these changes in gravitational pull, and they were able to kind of almost use the eclipse as some sort of a generator or something. I don't know, just wild ideas. And we don't know shit about gravity today. I mean, we just figured out that it's a wave and not a particle, but yeah, like we don't know how to control it or manipulate it or anything.
Well, I mean, in this day and age, there's still just such a disruption surrounding like what you just said, and how a study like astrology is still viewed by mainstream science as, you know, a fringe science, as kind of a science that's not really science. And maybe it doesn't follow the same, you know, mechanics as biochemistry, but it sure as hell it involves planets and cosmic forces that, like, if we're sitting here acknowledging that, yes, it is, the moon is what is creating the tides, you know, the moon does this, that, and the other, which we know a lot. So like, that's the moon. How do you think Jupiter or Saturn, which is, I mean, we're just a grain of salt on these planets. How do you think their gravitational pull and overall energetic relationship is with Earth? I mean, again, just because we can't feel it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You know, you can't see air particles, but you know that they're there. So it's like, there's so much that kind of goes back to the whole concept of just because we can't prove something does not mean that that's where the conversation ends. That's just what we know. But the conversation just begins, because without, you know, there has to be stuff that we don't know in order to ever eventually know. And we're never going to eventually know everything. But I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to ever know everything. I feel like the whole point is that we're on this like evolution to, you know, everything is just infinite and boundless. And there's so much, this is such a rabbit hole, just, you know, this conversation, aliens, everything.
It's a burden.
We don't know.
I'll tell you, knowing everything is quite the burden.
Hey, you do know your octopi, I'll tell you that.
Hey, they know me, Jeff. They know me.
What if there's like 4 octopi right now having some type of octopi podcast about humans?
That's epic. I wonder what my octopi would be named if it was a human.
Yeah, what would they decide their names would be?
Lexi. Oh, that's hilarious.
That's so funny. Awesome. Well, hey guys, this was such a blast. Thank you all for joining for the Cephalopod squad discussion. I loved it.
Thank you guys. This was a blast.
Jordan.
Such a great time.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, Jordan.
Yeah. Have a great evening.
You too.
See you
See you,
guys.
Bye,
bud.
guys.
See you guys.
Bye. Thanks everyone for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. That was such a ridiculous and hilarious conversation, and I wouldn't have it any other way. We get into a lot of heavy topics on this podcast, which is by design. There are a lot of darker elements of society today which need to have a light shined on them, because only by shining a light on the darkness can we recognize the light. But while we're doing that, why not spend some time with friends talking about how weird, crazy, cool these cephalopod creatures are? And so with that in mind, we got into the conversation so quickly I didn't have a chance to drop my octopus name, which would of course be Count Ocula. And he only eats chocolate-covered fish for breakfast. Of course, there's no relation to the breakfast cereal vampire. Please don't sue me, General Mills. In my octopus's garden, here are some of the items I'd have up for decoration. The helm from a sunken ship. An empty crab shell which I use for a hat on sunny days. Cooking equipment to make my favorite dish, octopus ink pasta. Shiny rocks. A treasure chest of pirate's gold. Shiny seashells. A pet sea turtle named Snappy. A poster of my favorite band, the beach cephalopods. A lava lamp. Shiny jellyfish. And a pair of custom Lululemons with 8 legs for when I need to hit the yoga studio. And now here's Count Ocula signing off for his octopus podcast, which is called Octangled.
There's a place in my mind where I want to be. I imagine you sitting next to me, driving into the night. We're so young and free, holding hands with no place when you're kissing me. Ocean in motion, watching